Lethal Company is the hit new game that came out last October. More importantly, it's still in early access, meaning updates to the game are to be expected and have already been released. I'm Banks, and I'm a game designer, and we're going to take a look at Lethal Company and see where the future is going to take it. When looking at updates to a game, you have two main types: overhauls and additions, and technical updates, but I doubt you're here to hear about how clipping can be better prevented. Overhauls are updates to a game that alter an element that already exists. For example, changing the behavior of a monster. When undoubtedly there will be multiple overhauls throughout the game, I have just a few to show with you today. The first one being the satellite update. When first looking at what needs to be added to a game, we should look at what will improve the gameplay experience. For example, there's no incentive to enter other moons. Well, Seekers already saw this by adding weather conditions, making a small list that will absolutely grow, which prevents players from going to the same moon consistently if, for example, it becomes eclipsed. This, however, does lead to another problem. There's no incentive for a player to stay on a moon with bad weather conditions. To fix this, I propose the satellite update. From now on, weather conditions on moons will be entirely unknown until you ping the moon with the satellite. Unfortunately, there's only so much power in these satellites, so the company isn't going to give these pings out for free. For 20 credits, with increasing costs the longer you survive, you can check the conditions of 3 separate moons. This can only be done 3 times per orbit, meaning the player will usually have to decide if going to any of them is worth it or to roll the dice on an entirely unknown condition for an entirely unknown planet. Now you might also notice a small asterisk earlier, that being the rising prices. This is to fix the major issue this game faces, a dynamic difficulty curve, bringing us to the maintenance update. Now, while the rising quotas are definitely a challenge, it's important to also mention it gives you a lot of money that late game there really aren't any good uses for. To fix this, let's introduce our ship. From now on, many important features of the ship can fail, requiring credits to fix them. This is to prevent the major money bloat that can happen late game. Some failures can be minor, some can be major. The thrusters can fail, leaving you to have 3 fewer hours in a day. The control panel can fail, meaning the party must rely on autopilot to leave. A virus can affect the terminal, leading to slow speeds and sometimes just straight up false information. The only way to fix these issues is to pay company credits, different amounts depending on how much they affect the player. So now there are these detrimental effects, but what causes them? Other than a small random chance every day, it would be the entities. Being too loud while the doors are closed, feeling too confident, well, the dog may knock a battery loose. Not paying attention to the baboon hawks, well, they just stole parts from the thrusters. Teleporting your teammate's corpse while it's loaded up with bracken spores that clogged up the entire system. More importantly, the new monsters can cause quite a few issues. That's right. New monsters, entity, beasts, whatever you want to call them, we got plenty more. We have 6 new entities that I'm going to bring you today. 3 for the outdoors and 3 for the indoors. Now let's just start off with our first entity from the outdoors. The Electrophorus angophinus, or the E-fish. Only spawns in rainy type conditions or moons with lakes. Especially common in stormy weather. When a metal object is left out for long enough, the E-fish has a chance to spawn, sometimes multiple. When this happens, a crew member has an opportunity to kill them, selling them for a decent sum. But really be careful, because the remaining lure is now infected with the fish spawn. Holding it has a chance to bring the infection to you. This will have no effect on the player, but if they come back to the ship while infected or carrying an infected item, the terminals will become infected by a nasty virus. The Rapax folium, or the Elder. Despite genetically being the exact same as a bracken, these creatures are much older, to the point where they have outgrown their shelters. The Elder will now spawn on moons in which a bracken has previously made a kill and the body was never recovered. This gives a much needed incentive to track down the body before it's too late. The Elder will spawn before the crew's arrival, taking the appearance of a tree, even on maps without them. Every in-game hour, it will randomly move, however always closer to the ship. The Elder will always make it to the ship by 1 PM at the latest. No player is present, the Elder will steal the ship and move it somewhere completely random in the map. If there is a player present and they fail to halt its approach, they will die and remain where the ship once was. However, if a player manages to close the doors before the Elder makes its attacks, it will leave and try to come back in a future time. But please be aware, the Elder is fast, so anyone on computers want to have a much greater challenge than just some dogs. The Electrophagus colchiae, or Mosquitoes. Just as annoying as their normal counterparts, these fellows will attempt to suck the power out of any ship. However, they are quite easy to prevent. Turning off the lights in terminal before leaving will completely cause them to ignore it. If you left them on, however, it can lead to your downfall. Being left on a ship to feed for too long, it will cause damage, but in the end that can be repaired. Left for too long, they will become bloated, causing an electric discharge that kills the next person who gets too close. The only way to defeat the mosquitoes is to turn the lights and terminal off, then wait for them to leave, or smack them with a shovel to get rid of them for good. All three of these make staying in the ship a far more frightening experience, making plenty of times in which they are unable to help their comrades, while also making it far more necessary for someone to stay, unless they want to go searching for a ship at midnight. Why don't we move on to the internal creatures? The Teleless Vorax, or the Worm. The Worm comes in two forms. The first being its juvenile form, a small, quick, slithering worm that will consume a player whole before crawling up a wall and turning into a cocoon. These can easily be killed. One shovel hit is all it will take. The adult form, however, is much more nuanced, taking up an entire hallway until the creature enters its maw, which can be an entity or a player. This will cause the creature to seemingly dissolve into the walls and reappear randomly throughout the facility. Now, being consumed by a worm is not a death sentence. However, it can lead to one. No matter what, once you get eaten, you will be teleported throughout the facility completely randomly, leaving both players completely stranded. A much more subtle effect than the Bracton. Cube. Cube is a small machine. For now. In its smallest form, it can be picked up and sold for credits at the company building. Once it leaves the facility, it becomes completely inert and has no more effects, making for a fairly consistent, high-priced object. But if it is ever scanned, it bloats to twice its size, now being completely unable to be picked up. This is the final warning you will get from it. If it's scanned again, it will once again double in size. Now rolling to the nearest player. At this phase, it's loud and easy to notice. Only being able to move in a grid, it's fairly easy to get out of it. But if the cube ever touches you, it will deal half your health and damage, but it's quick. If it hits you once, it can probably hit you again. If scanned once more, it will reach its final phase, doubling in size once again. Now hovering, it can phase through walls and will always head to the nearest player at an exact match to their walking speed. When no players are in the facility, it heads to the exact center of the map. It cannot be killed, and it cannot be contained at its final phase. Homo sapien, the traitor. He's human, even if he doesn't look like it. Only hostile if provoked. Do not provoke him. He wants something. It will be guaranteed to be in the facility. If you give him what he wants, he'll give you an accessory. Speaking of accessories, a brand new slot that gives a major permanent buff to a player. You can only hold one per slave slot and you can never remove it, so be careful with it. There are 4 accessories you can obtain. The backpack, which gives you a whole free slot. The balloon, which completely removes the impact of weight on a player. The spatial satchel. Your first slot can now be taken through the teleporters. Radar. You can always have a vague direction of the ship, the entrance, scrap, and enemies at the top of your map. Some of these are items that can make a run great, but it requires a great risk of completing the trader's request. This gives the crew a much greater incentive to go deep into the facility and, hopefully for us, to get lost. Oh, one last thing. Once he gives out all accessories, he will give out one last item. The duct tape. Using 2 apparatus and a duct tape, you can go under the facility and fix the wiring and power the drill,
giving access to the Golden Planet.
Theoretically, everything here is worth substantially more than normal items, but it's far too late to make any good use of it. Now it's a race against the clock as the ship autopilots its way to the entrance of the Golden Planet, simply giving easy access to the teleporters. Behind the ship is the Lazarus Wall. Placing a corpse on the wall will instantly revive them. This is not just helpful, but pretty much mandatory for this planet. The autopilot will never leave, and all previously encountered enemies have made their way here. Your goal is to collect as much of the scrap as you can and throw it into the gullets of the company, a great maw that sits at the center of the map. To defeat the beast, you must overfeed it, gorge itself on the scrap that it's been saving away for when humanity is long gone. And do that, and you will have beaten lethal